Welcome to C3 In This Together, 30 minutes in our own voice, a mental health awareness series. Today's topic, caring for a loved one who is incarcerated with a mental illness. We will hear from someone with a lived experience who has helped to care for a loved one and other individuals incarcerated with a mental illness. My hope is to create awareness that beyond the statistics are names, people, real life stories, caregivers, and loved ones of those who are incarcerated. Today, our guest is Miss Sylvia Oliphant. She is an advocate for the incarcerated, a NAMI COB board member, and a NAMI provider facilitator. Of course, NAMI is the largest grassroots organization as it relates to mental health awareness and coming alongside those who are living with a mental health condition. And by definition, NAMI simply means the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So we are so honored and excited to have Miss Sylvia with us. Miss Sylvia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Cassell.
It's an honor to be with you. Of course, we've worked on several projects, initiatives, and I'm just always so excited to hear your work, and more important than your work, your heart. So I'm just grateful that people will get to hear that. Before we jump into our time together, allow me, my friends, to share some statistics surrounding mental illness and the incarcerated. So, again, I want to make sure that I share some statistics, give you some context of what's happening with those who are incarcerated and those who are living with a mental uh, illness as it relates to being incarcerated. We'll put those on the screen. Of course, by numbers, we do know that over 2.2 million people are incarcerated in the United States. Over 225,000 women are incarcerated here in the United States. In terms of the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color, uh, in terms of their numbers, uh, those who are listed as BIPOC, they are in state prisons at a rate of 5 times those who are white. So think about that. One out of three African American males are more likely to be sentenced for a lifetime prison sentence of at least 10 years. We do know that African American males make up about 40.2 of the population in terms of the US prison system. Black women, in terms of numbers, Black women are more likely to be incarcerated, twice as likely as white women. We do know that the US will spend over $87 billion on jails and prisons. 43% of people in the state prisons have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, and 70% of youth in the juvenile justice system are listed as having a mental health disorder. 66% of people in federal prisons reported not receiving any mental health care while they were incarcerated. Just a couple more. In terms of estimation, it is estimated that $65,000 is spent on an inmate with a mental health condition versus an inmate without a mental health condition. Those numbers are about 35,000. And here's a staggering and sobering statistic. The three largest psychiatric facilities in the United States are prisons in LA County, Cook County, Chicago, and New York City, Rikers Island. Wow, wow, wow. Staggering numbers and sobering
Yes.
statistics. Wow. Any thoughts on that, Miss Sylvia? Those numbers?
The numbers are right, but it's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do more in this country to have somewhere for sick people to go and recover, and it shouldn't be the jails and the prisons.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that last statistic always stands out to me that our three largest psychiatric facility. And my friends, for those of you who are watching, that simply means that where the most psychiatric intervention and treatment is happening, it's not in the hospitals, it's not in a resiliency or recovery house or a crisis stabilization unit. It's happening in the prison. So as Miss Sylvia says, we do need to do a lot more. as it relates to those who are dealing with a mental health condition while incarcerated. Well, let's jump right in. Tell us your story, Miss Sylvia, surrounding caring for a loved one who is incarcerated with a mental illness.
Thank you. So my loved one is my daughter, who was incarcerated for a period of time. She lives with schizoaffective disorder. And it was just something that happened overnight. And once we got to a place where we realized she was going to be there for a while, what can we do differently? And so the first thing I had to do was understand what the criminal justice system looked like for a parent who's trying to get services for a child, who but knows no one. The first thing I had to do was introduce myself to the people that were around her, and that was a challenge. So that was the first thing I had to do was, and then once I got to meet the people that would be responsible for caring for her, I had to befriend them. I had to share information and encourage her to equally share information. It was it was a it was a rough it was a difficult thing to do because these are total strangers. You know your child, you know what they've gone through, but now you're introducing them to a total stranger that you're asking to care for them. And that was very hard to do.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your story, Miss Sylvia. And before we go any further, again, thank you for your heart. Thank you. We want to be very mindful that, as I said at the beginning, that those who are incarcerated with a mental health condition, they have names, they have loved ones, right? They have caregivers, and I can't imagine what it's like to be a parent and navigating that experience. So thank you for sharing your story. Just want to highlight as you were speaking, what came to my mind was the word advocate, right? We use that word as it relates to legislation and other areas, of our lives. But I want to encourage people who are watching, you be the biggest advocate for yourself and for your loved one, right? Fight for your loved one, advocate for them. I like what you said, Miss Sylvia. You got to know the people who were caring for your daughter. And that is so imperative that you do that. So, my friends, if those of you who have a loved one that's dealing with a mental health condition, maybe they're incarcerated, navigating this system that can be so filled with silos, we do know that sometimes the system, they operate in silos where the systems, they don't talk to each other. You advocate for your loved one. You are the expert in their stories, and I often tell people that while I'm an expert at what I do in terms of being a clinician, being a doctor, being a psychologist, the individual themselves and their loved ones, they are the expert in their stories. So just wanted to highlight that as well. Let's go to our next question. What would you say to someone who's caring for a loved one who's incarcerated with a mental illness? And also, the second part of that question, what are some things that we can say to an individual who may be incarcerated with a mental illness? So, speak to the caregivers of loved ones who are incarcerated with a mental illness, and then give us some thoughts, some anecdotes, some narratives, some tips on speaking with and coming alongside those who may be incarcerated with a mental illness.
Sure. So for the caregivers, the first thing I recommend is a journal. You have to document, keep a good record of what's happening on a daily basis. um, get engaged, know the guards, know the warden, know the medical team there, right? Those are the people that you may have to rely on when your child cannot speak for themselves. So I would definitely recommend you get engaged, keep a journal. One of the most important things to remember is that staff changes also often, right? So you want to meet the people that are in place in the event of an emergency, and then remind them that if something should go wrong, to please reach out to me and let me know who's taking your role. You can do that. It's okay to ask, right? And then for anyone who's in that situation, living with a mental illness, one of the things my daughter did was she signed the HIPAA release. I had a release for her dorm director, I had a release for her psychiatrist, and I had a release for her counselor. Now, every facility may not require three, but those are some of the questions you need to ask when they first get admitted to those locations. So always encourage them to tell the truth, report their symptoms, report changes in their symptoms. And those are the things that, again, you're bridging the gap between your child, the psychiatrist, and the counselor, because they may not speak to each other, but you have to be the person that introduced them to each other. As sad as that may sound, that happens often.
Wow. I love that. Amazing tips of journaling and coming alongside those who are offering care to your loved one. And the word that came to my mind was collaborative care, right? It's so important when you are journeying with your loved one with a mental health condition that there's collaborative care with you and those who are offering care to your loved one, whether it's your clinician, your psychiatrist, in this case, those who are in the prison system, because we've found that where there's collaborative care, right, that there's better interventions that happens. And then we also know this, right, just from a medical standpoint, that whenever you are present, right, it leads to accountability, and we believe in that, in
Yes.
accountability across the board. So thank you for that. And I wanted to, and maybe we'll speak to this in a little bit, but tell us a little bit more about the importance of documenting and journaling. I wanted to circle back to that.
Sure. So, and a perfect example could be a conversation with the caseworker who then goes out for 2 months on leave. You now have a record of what you discussed to bring to the next counselor. I think that was essential because the turnaround for the staff is, can change at the drop of a dime. So I thought journaling allowed me to go back and say, okay, on March 1st, I spoke with you and we talked about this, because they may not remember. And so I always had that journal to remind me and to remind the person I spoke with or their predecessor what we discussed.
Wow, good. I love that. As you said, and you know this so much better than I do, is the turnover that happens within that population. So it's good to keep a great record. You mentioned about the HIPAA release. I wanted to add to that what's called a psychiatric advance directive. A lot of people are not familiar with that, but a psychiatric advance directive, it's a legal document that your loved one signs that says, in the event of a mental health crisis, a psychiatric episode, these are my symptoms. This is what medication I might be on, and this is my preferred methods of intervention. So I do encourage people to consider, if you have a loved one with a mental health condition, talk to a lawyer, talk to your clinician, your primary care provider about getting what's called a psychiatric advance directive. Because again, it's almost like a living will, right? That in the event that your loved one finds themselves in a crisis, they will have that document that says, this is how I would like to be treated. This is my symptoms, and this is what I'm asking that you do for me. All right. Let's move to the next question. What do you want people to know? Did you talk about some things? That second part, I think I want to go back to that. What are some things you want to say to the individual themselves that's incarcerated? That's the work that you do. You advocate for the incarcerated, so you speak to that demographic. What are some things that we can say if we have a loved one, if we're coming alongside someone that's incarcerated with a mental illness? What are some tips that you can give us?
Um, the most important thing is communication, communicating effectively. Um, Understanding that your loved one may have moments where they just don't want to talk. those are the times when they too can write down what their symptoms are, what they're feeling. So again, me and my daughter did this every day. We jotted down her symptoms. She was able to express it to me and maybe not comfortable with her doctor. So that's where I came in. I could go behind her and say, okay, we just got off a phone conversation. She's uncomfortable sharing this, but I'll share it.
Wow.
And so, again, communicate, 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 and then encourage your loved one to be honest about their symptoms. It may not be easy to talk to a stranger, right? When my daughter first got incarcerated, she was uncomfortable with the doctor because he didn't know her. So I would call, introduce myself, and say, this is what's going on. How can you help her? That's one of the most important things. I can't express communication enough.
Wow. Good, good. And I like what you said, Miss Sylvia, because uh, again, so often we don't think in those terms, right? That it's difficult for the person with a mental health condition. There are times it's difficult for them to communicate what those symptoms might be. We do know at times, depending on the diagnosis, but one of the symptoms for possible symptoms for a mental health condition is a lack of insight, a lack of awareness, right? So a lack of insight to what's happening with self, with others, and even their mental health condition. So there are times where your loved one might not be able to communicate that. At NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, there's a term that really has helped us to understand that as we've worked with our loved ones and those that we care for. And it's this Greek word, anosognosia, right? It's a long word, but it really has helped, especially caregivers, to understand that at times your loved one may lack the insight to what's happening to themselves, to you, and to their mental health condition. So that's a great tool to have them write it out so that they may be able to communicate what's happening to them. Let's move to the next question. What do you want people to know about managing our mental health and the importance of mental health awareness? Of course, this is what this segment is about, 30 minutes in our own voice. It's all about mental health awareness. So, what do you want people to know about managing our mental health and the importance of mental health awareness?
First thing I would say is it's okay to accept that everything is not perfect,
Mm.
right? And then find ways that work best for you to manage that, whether it's stress, anxiety, fatigue. Um, it's important that you listen to those symptoms. They won't go away if
Mm.
you ignore them, right? So find the things that work for you, whether it's taking a walk, a glass of tea, your favorite television show, or just turning off your phone and sitting quiet for 30 minutes. Meditate, prayer, read something that's positive. A lot of times news can stress people out. Turn off the TV. But you have to listen to those symptoms and you have to find a way not to get so overwhelmed that you're no longer able to manage your own loved one's situation. So take that time to just turn everything off, count backwards if that works, and start over.
Thank you. Again, when you're caring for a loved one, and you said it to your point, the importance of taking care of your own mental health, right? We often use that narrative and that experience from what they tell us when we go on the plane, right? And they're offering those safety exercises and talking us through that. One of the things they tell us is in the event of turbulence, right? A mask will fall from the ceiling. Put on your own mask first before helping others that might be traveling with you. And we want to remind people of that. We can't remind you enough. We can't say it enough, right? In the event of turbulence. And my friends, in this journey of dealing with a mental health condition, with a loved one, caring for others, there will be turbulence. But please reach up, pull down that mask, inhale, exhale, breathe, meditate, pray, walk, journal, count. do mindfulness exercises, grounding exercises. That's what your mask becomes in the event of those turbulent times. As we begin to wrap up, Miss Sylvia, tell us about your work. What is it that you do? I think people will be so amazed by the work that you're doing, and how can people reach out to you in terms of making connection? Of course, don't give us your telephone number. Don't give us your bank account information. You could give all of that to me. You could give me your bank account, but maybe an email or a website of how we can reach out to you. But tell us about your work.
So I started advocating in 2011 with NAMI, and I just never felt like there was enough. So I went out and I started looking for ways to do more. And so as a facilitator, you meet people, you talk about their stories, but sometimes their story didn't end in that support group. So I would share my email address and then I would start advocating publicly for them, meaning I would go to the jail and visit their loved ones, right? I go to the Cobb County Jail at least once or twice a week. I'm in court maybe once a month because I do go to court with family members. And I just speak for them. A lot of times they don't know what to say. And so I will say, Your Honor, I'm here in support of this person who's living with this condition. And the reason he's before your court is because of the underlying mental illness. And then I would ask the court to provide mental health support instead of jail time and instead of a large bond. Can they go home on and wear an ankle monitor instead of sitting in jail? So I've just decided that if the court don't know why you're there, they're not going to treat you like a person. You get treated less than. And I hated to leave someone to be treated as less than. So I started making myself known and greeting the judges and befriending the judges. That's free. That is a free service. All of us as advocates can do that. And so I started doing that and just to help families. It meant so much to me to see a mother smile instead of crying. And that is something that just can't replace the way I feel about people. That cannot go away. And so I just always wanted to do more. And so I started doing that. For anyone interested in reaching out to me, they can email me at sao66@yahoo.com. And they can also find me on the NAMI Cop website. They will find my phone number. I also answer the hotline. So you can call the hotline, which is 404-695-5333, and you will get me on that. It's a private phone that I answer. And I'm here to serve.
Wow, I love that. And of course, we will put that on the screen so you could reach out to Miss Sylvia. Miss Sylvia, you are a gem. You are a gift to this world. As you were speaking, I just can't imagine what it's like for family members who are in court to be alone and then to have you show up and to advocate for them, to care for them. Thank you for doing that work. We so want to remind people that this work of coming alongside those who are incarcerated, right? They are more than just a number. I can't say that enough. We also want to remind people that we don't criminalize, we don't victimize, nor do we demonize mental health conditions, right? We want people to know, regardless of what your mental health condition might be, your journey might be with the social justice system, that we see you as a person. And one of the things I often say, and I believe this, is that social justice for the mentally ill should be proactive, it should be reparative, it should be restorative. It should be vertical and it should be horizontal. And what do you mean by that, Dr. Cassell? What I mean by that is we see through the lens of the incarcerated as created in the image of God, worthy of intervention, worthy of forgiveness, worthy of accountability, and worthy of restitution. So we want to remind people of that. That social justice, again, right? It should be reparative, proactive. It should be horizontal, and it should be vertical. Miss Sylvia, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for caring for those who are often left out, the incarcerated. Thank you for caring for our returning citizens. And as I wrap up our time, you'll notice some of the language that we're using, right? We're using incarcerated, we're using returning citizens, because we do want to make clear that we don't want to stigmatize, right? Those who've been through this journey. Uh, Sylvia, we speak well wishes and blessings to you, to your daughter, continued recovery on this journey. My friends, thank you as always for being with us for this time. We do want to remind you, if you or your loved one might be in crisis, please contact 988. That's the 24/7 National Crisis and Suicide Lifeline. We'll put that on the screen. Also, for more resources surrounding mental health and mental health awareness, we invite you to visit NAMI, NAMI.org. That will be on the screen. And as always, we invite you to visit our website at c3inthistogether.com. That will also be on the screen. And then we also want to remind you, if you were impacted by this video, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, C3 In This Together, share this video, comment, and let us know how you've been impacted, so that together we can bring hope and healing to this world. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time for 30 minutes in our own voice. Miss Sylvia, thank you for your time. It's always an honor to journey with you and to partner with you in this work.
Thank you, Dr. Cassell. Have a wonderful day.
You as well. Take care, my
Thank you.
friends. We'll see you next time.